Hey guys, so today we're going to be taking a look at graphing our sine and cosine equations. I know that the last time we had class, we kind of did a little bit of an exploration to try to figure out what that looked like with the key points, and that's going to be super important for us today. So, taking a look at it, first we want to kind of go over what those key points were from yesterday. So for sine, remember sine was 0, 0, pi over 2, 1, pi 0, 3 pi over 2, -1, and 2 pi 0. Now, the graph for sine looks something like this, as you guys should have seen the other day. And all of our key points that we've got are kind of at these spots here. So when we're thinking about the way that the sine graph goes, it's going to go middle, high, middle, low, and then back to the middle. So I'm going to label these guys here because that's going to be important for helping us graph them. Because whichever way it goes is going to be important because we're going to be able to find what the new middle is, the new high, and the new low. So that's going to be important for us to remember. Sine goes middle, high, middle, low, middle. Cosine has the same kind of idea. Our 5 key points for cosine were 0, 1, pi over 2, 0, pi -1, 3 pi over 2, 0, and 2 pi 1. Now our graph for cosine looks something like this, where we've got our key points happening as well. And the order for cosine goes high, middle, low, middle, high. So one thing that's important to kind of pay attention to, at least right now, is that all of these x values are going to stay the same. Well, right now they're going to stay the same. Next week at some point we will look at how those will change, but for today, tomorrow, they're just going to stay as is. So every time we start a problem, whether it's sine or cosine, we're always going to have our x values go 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, every time. And then we want to make sure that we're remembering the order of middle, high, middle, low, middle. Now we've got some different functions that are happening with our equations. Now, the a value here on both sine and cosine are going to represent something called the amplitude. What the amplitude does is it's going to stretch our graph vertically. And what that means it's going to do is it's going to change where our highs and lows happen. So the x value will stay the same, but where that y value is going to change depending on what a is. And we'll take a look at how that's going to change. The next one that we have is our b value, and that's something that's called a period change. So what that's going to do is it's going to stretch our graph horizontally. So what that means that it's going to do is instead of being from 0 to 2 pi in terms of those x values, it's going to either shrink or extend it. So it's going to change our x values. Our d value is something that's called a vertical shift. And what that vertical shift is going to do, and I also call it a midline at times. So vertical shift or midline, they both mean the same thing. So what this is going to do is it's going to move everything up or down. So it's going to move our whole graph up or down. And what that's going to do is it's going to change the high, the low, and where that middle happens. So depending on where that is, it's going to change where all of those happen. And then the last one that we've got is our C value. And that's called a horizontal shift. And what that does is it's going to move our graph left or right. And what that's going to do is it's going to change where we start. So instead of starting at 0, we might be starting at a different point. So it's going to change the starting position, and then everything else will shift. So pretty much today and the rest of this week, we're going to mainly focus on these two guys here. Okay, so today and tomorrow, we're going to focus on just the amplitudes and the vertical shifts. Next week, we'll add in the period and the horizontal shifts, but those won't be until next week. Today, we're just going to focus on these. So we want to actually take a look at some of these. What we want to do is we want to state the amplitude in the midline and then give the coordinates of our 5 key points. So remember, our general equation is y equals a sine of x plus d. I've ignored the b and the c values because we're not working with them right now. We just care about the a and the d. So with number 1, we have 5 sine of x, which technically means we have a 5 sine of x plus 0. So our a value is our amplitude. So that means that our amplitude is 5 because it's the one that's being multiplied by sine. Our d value is the midline, and that's whatever's being added on the end. So our midline is 0. Now we want to figure out what our coordinates are going to be. So I'm going to write the start of them. So we have 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. But we want to figure out what that second coordinate is going to be. Remember, our order goes middle, high, middle, low, middle. We want to know what those are going to be. So to do that, we have an equation that we can use. Our middle is always going to be 0 plus whatever our d value is. Our high is always going to be the amplitude times 1 plus the d value. And the low is always going to be the amplitude times -1 plus the d value. And we can always do it like that to get there. So for number 1 here, our middle would be 0 plus 0 is just 0. So at all of these middles, I can fill in the 0 for that second coordinate. Our high is going to be 5 times 1 plus 0, which just gives us 5. And then our low is going to be 5 times -1 plus 0, which will give us a -5. And those are our 5 key points. We need to make sure that we're finding the middle, the high, and the low. Number 2, we want to do the same thing. It's cosine, so the order is going to change. So instead of being middle, high, middle, low, middle, it's going to change around. But to find our amplitude and our midline, we're doing the same thing. So our amplitude is the number that's out front. There is no number out front, which means that our amplitude is 1. And then our midline is going to be whatever's being added on the end, and in this case, it's a -3. So now we can go ahead and find our values. So for cosine, we go high, middle, low, middle, high. So we've got 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And now we want to find those values. So our middle is going to be 0 plus -3, which gives us -3. So at all of those middles, we're going to put in a -3. Our high is going to be 1 times 1 plus -3. And that's going to go ahead and give us a -2. So our high is -2. Our low, 1 times -1 plus -3. That's going to give us a -4. And there we have our high, middle, low, middle, high. Okay. All right. We're going to do one more here, and that's number 3. So our amplitude on this one is 4.5, because our amplitude and the a value are the same. Now we want to state what our midline is, which is whatever's being added on the end. So now we can find our values. So 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Okay, so 0 for sine, we go middle, high, middle, low, middle. We need to find what those values are. Our middle is 0 plus 1, so that gives us a 1. So all of our middles, we're going to get a 1. Our high is 4.5 times 1 plus 1. That gives us 5.5. Our low is 4.5 times negative 1 plus 1. That gives us a negative 3.5. And those are our answers. Okay. All right. Now what you guys are going to do now is you guys are going to go ahead on Google Classroom and work on the practice problems that are there. In those, you're finding the amplitude, the midline, and the coordinates of the 5 key points, just like we've been doing here. If you have any questions at all, just let me know, and I will make a video to go over it for you. All right. Have a great day.